Temps, you were at the game last night at the Garden. Heat had lost 7 straight. This thing in the second quarter turned into the Karl Anthony Towns show.
Certainly did. 15 straight points for Towns, was doing everything in this game. Early on, it looked like the Heat were going to be able to finally snap that losing streak. Instead, it turned into the Karl Towns show, and it eventually turned into the Knicks show.
Yeah, Chiney, let's underline that again. Karl Anthony Towns scored 15 consecutive points.
What I love is his versatility in his game. He will knock down a long-distance three-pointer, but also he attacks the basket. He's one of the best driving bigs in the NBA. But look at that, 31 feet, that's range.
Wow, the Knicks have had an incredible offense this season.
As you mentioned, they were down early in the game. That one gave them a lead going into halftime, and then they just completely blew the doors off of Miami in the third quarter. Here's Mikal Bridges running the floor, and then Hart. The Knicks, Chiney, just opened it up in the second half.
Yeah, especially that third quarter. Mikal Bridges had himself a game, but when they're comfortable, when they're rolling, they just look like a team that has better chemistry than most teams in the NBA.
Hart in a disastrous second half, and especially fourth quarter team the last few weeks. That's why they've lost 8 in a row, but that third quarter was as bad as it gets.
So Josh Hart had a triple-double. Towns wound up with 23. We are surrounded by Knicks fans here.
Certainly are.
Both in our building and as I just walk the streets every single day. And there's sort of a feeling, the sense I get is sort of a feeling of hopelessness. Like, we're good, but we're just clearly not good enough. They're going to play Boston in the second round. For the Knicks, for those of you who are not following the standings, the Knicks are locked into 3. They're not going to get caught, and they're not going to catch Boston. So they're going to play the Celtics in the second round if they get there. Do you give them any chance of beating them?
Nope. No chance at all. I mean,
well, that was fun.
They're 0-5 this year against the Cavs and the Celtics. I was at all 3 games that they played against the Celtics. None of them were competitive. They were not as competitive as the score even was, and none of the games were close at the end. I just don't see a way that the Knicks, we just saw Karl Towns. He's an incredible offensive player. His issues defensively, in particular, are a huge problem against the spacing the Celtics have, and I just don't see how they can.
Oh, man, it's in the morning. We're supposed to be all sunshine and orange juice. You know what month this is? It's March. You never say there's no chance. There's Cinderellas out there.
I'll say there's no, the Cinderellas in college basketball. The NBA, there's 7-game series.
It's true. It's true. Look, I would never say they have absolutely zero chance because I feel like when healthy, they can compete with anybody. Will they get swept? Absolutely not. But what I do like about this New York Knicks is they made a choice. They decided to go towards offense this year, and oftentimes we've learned in the NBA countless times, you cannot win. It's very difficult to win in your first year after making a trade or, retooling their roster. And so this is just an indication of what is possible to come. Obviously, they need to work on their defense, but, without Jalen Brunson, these guys are still finding ways to step up.
So today's very nice. The Knicks are not beating the Celtics.
To give you a sense of where the Knicks fan mentality is, walking in the street, I hear people say to me, Greeny, who can we get? And I want to say, guys, you got
them.
You had all this stuff to trade. You got Mikal Bridges. You got Karl Towns. Yeah. This is the team you're going with, and unfortunately, right now, you look stuck behind the top 2. Let me show you what the odds say at ESPN Bet. They have the Knicks at 13-1 to win the East. That is a distant third behind the Celtics and Cavaliers. Boston, the odds-on favorite at -140. The Cavs are +180. Chiney, I touched on this with you yesterday, but I'll make the point more. Look. The Celtics are tremendous. No one's taking away anything from them, and they are the defending champions, and maybe that puts to rest what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But I'm old enough to remember when this was a Celtic team, and it was mostly the same thing. Now, they've added Holiday, and I think he's a really good leader and glue kind of guy. But this was the team that lost series they weren't supposed to, blew games they weren't supposed to, gave away leads, all those kinds of things.
Their path was easier last year.
Last year they played Indiana and Dallas. I'm not trying to diminish what they did. They won. To the victors go the spoils. But are we convinced those days are over? Because this Cleveland team they're going to wind up getting in the conference final is way better than anybody they played last year.
Yeah, I know the question is potentially, would you bet your house on the
Would you bet the palatial estate that we have you in out there in L.A.?
In Texas, not in California.
Either one.
I would not bet my house, but maybe my couch, potentially. And it's a great couch. It's a love sack. If you know love sacks, yeah, that's a big risk. That's a big investment on the Cavs potentially knocking down the Celtics. And I'm not saying that they are going to do it because I do believe that you mentioned Drew Holiday. Kristaps Porzingis is the X factor. Anytime he touches the ball, he's the ultimate unicorn. He forces those bigs for Cleveland to have to go out to the perimeter, and that forces them to play small ball. But if there's going to be one team that is built by design to try to stop them, it's very few times that we celebrate the DeAndre Hunter acquisition. They are making a push now to be able to say, we need someone to guard Jaylen Brown. We need someone to guard Jason Tatum. If they get their cards right, which we have seen the heart of them on that parquet floor, the Cleveland Cavaliers with Donovan Mitchell and his heroics, it is a potential series that will not go 4 games 5. It could go 7 and it could break the Cavs' way, but still the Celtics, they hold all the cards and they're pacing themselves to repeat.
Here's the way I look at it, Bontemps. You tell me. I'm just a fan. With Porzingis healthy, the Celtics are unbeatable. I don't think anybody beats them on either side. Yep. But that's a big if, literally and figuratively, right? I mean, he tends to be hurt most of the time.
Yeah, the Celtics' top 6 is still clearly the best in the league. If they're healthy and they're playing at their best, they're better than every team in the league. But as you said, even in this recent stretch where they played the 5 best teams in the league besides them, they led 4 of the 5 games by 20 points. And they gave back those leads in all the games, right? Like, they still are a very up-and-down team even in games. However, yeah, it comes down to the health of those guys. And if they're healthy, Cavs aren't beating them. I don't think anybody else.
You know what's funny? You mentioned how they're up and down. So are the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? We just saw their win streak end by the Orlando Magic because they had an off shooting night. The Celtics live and die by the 3, so do the Cleveland Cavaliers. They found a formula that works, but we'll see if it's good enough.
Cavs also haven't done it yet in the playoffs. Let's see them actually win 2 rounds of the playoffs before we say they can beat the Celtics.
We'll find out when we get there. Let's leave that for the moment because we are also counting it down to the start of the NCAA tournament tonight. The first 4, and you see we are counting it down. We're just a little over 10 hours from tip-off, and I want to do a little sound-off here because I'm going to bring in Seth Greenberg and Paul Feinbaum. Here they are. They are my Uncle Seth and Sir Paul. Where are they? Here they are. Oh, there they are. Hello, gentlemen. I want you guys to hear something that Rick Pitino said on McAfee's show yesterday because I found it fascinating, and if anything, I think he didn't take it quite far enough. This was Pitino yesterday.
They have more teams than just about anyone. The Big 12, Big 10 now, they've all expanded, where the Big East has not expanded. I've been trying to get them to expand now for 2 years. I think that even combining, like Coach K said, the ACC with the Big East in basketball would be a wonderful thing. So larger is better, certainly.
So that was Pitino yesterday saying they should combine the ACC and the Big East. And obviously he has reasons why he's interested in that in the Big East. Quick takes before I get to mine. Seth, what do you think of it?
I've been saying for years that the ACC and the Big East should merge, without a doubt. And obviously the Big East schools would get only a smaller portion of the revenue share, but it just makes sense. Look, the ACC cut their teeth on basketball. That is the tradition of the ACC. And the ACC right now is not even in the conversation. You're talking about 4 teams in the NCAA tournament. Imagine if the ACC and the Big East merged. Imagine the matchups that you would have. You'd have crossover games. And if not the whole Big East, there is no reason that you take Cal and Stanford, I don't care about football, and not take UConn. Are you kidding me? You imagine Duke and UConn, North Carolina and UConn, UConn and Syracuse. Think about all the traditional games we've lost because of realignment. But yeah, I do think you got to find a way of merging the ACC and the Big East, have a commissioner of basketball on one side, maybe that's Val Ackerman, and have a commissioner of the league combined. But I absolutely agree with that. I've been saying it for 2 years. We've said it on game day.
So let me make this point then, Paul, because I've seen your notes, and I know that you're going to look at it from the football perspective. And from the football perspective, obviously, there is no reason for it. And I agree with that. But I think that this could be the jumping-off point of the new reality that eventually needs to happen. The merging of conferences, as we have seen them, the emergence of super conferences, exist solely because of football. There is no earthly reason why Stanford and Cal, which exist adjacent to the Pacific Ocean, should be in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and they shouldn't be in any other sport besides football. So the point, I think, as I hear what Pitino is saying, Paul, it makes sense to me that you have your football allegiances, let them do what they want to do, and then let the other sports all have conferences that actually make sense geographically and rivalry-wise and all the other things. The time has come for us to make that separation of church and state, if you will, football and then everything else. What do you think of that, Paul?
And before I even say I think it's all a terrible idea, it is worth pointing out that the ACC does include Notre Dame in basketball, but not in football. So there is some precedent. But I think the football card is going to make it impossible because the ACC still prides itself as one of the big boys, even though, as Seth has accurately said, in basketball they have fallen off. But football drives the engine. And I know this is not the right time of the month or the year to say that in the middle of March Madness, but it's why the contracts are made. And I think it would be very difficult for the ACC, which just spent 2 years in court with Clemson and Florida State trying to get out of the league, now to say, okay, we're starting all over again. In about 6 or 7 years, Greeny, this whole thing is going to blow up anyway, and I think that will be the moment. But I don't think it can happen until then.
What does blow up mean? Because that's what I'm saying. I mean, right now, we live in a world where USC and UCLA are on the same conference as Rutgers and Maryland, and outside of football, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, what I mean by that, and I didn't finish completely because I kept thinking that Greenberg, and Feinbaum have a personal injury case somewhere in Brooklyn in a few minutes. But the point being that the television contracts will unwind in a couple of years. That's the moment. And I don't need to tell you guys because you're highfalutin employees at ESPN, and I'm stuck out here in the hinterlands. But the point is that when these contracts all come up, and they're all going to come up at about 2032, that's the moment everything will change. I don't think it can possibly happen until then, long after Rick Pitino retires at the age of 80.
What do you, Seth, a final word on this? And again, this could be just the beginning of a conversation if we want it to be. A final thought, Seth, go ahead.
You know, look, I understand what Paul is saying, but why not be forward thinking? I like right now, you got to think out of the box. If you're the ACC, you got to think outside the box. If you're the Big East, you got to think outside the box. The landscape of college athletics is changing so rapidly, and I agree with you, Paul. It makes no sense. No disregard to Stanford and Cal. They don't belong in the ACC. We need to regionalize the sports outside of football. Plain and simple. And the sooner it's done, the better the total enterprise is going to be. These administrators have to all get on the same page. What is best long-term for the enterprise and figure out an answer? Because right now, it's not working. It's not working for the UCLA coming into the Big Ten country and playing in anything but football. It's not working for Stanford and Cal coming back east playing in basketball. That's just the way it is. It's not working.
Yeah, it's not meant. This is not meant to be a criticism of anyone or anything. I understand why everyone has done what they have done and staked out whatever they could. God bless them. But I think the reality is all of that is about football. And if we can separate football from all the rest of it, I think it would be, and God forbid we should actually think about what would be best for the actual players. I think it would be much, much better for them. All right, let me leave that there for the moment. The offices of Greenberg, and Feinbaum are momentarily closed, but they will continue as we go on. Coming up, much more on Mel's mock, including for the very first time I've seen, there's a third quarterback in the top 10